Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we've been to see Caligula, the ultimate cut. So Caligula is a very well-known kind of mad train wreck of a film which had a troubled production. In 1979 it came out. It was directed by Tinto Brass. It was written by Gore Vidal. But they sort of didn't really get their say over what the final film would be because the producer, Bob Guccione, who founded Penthouse magazine, so you get an idea of the kind of guy he is, inserted loads of pornography that he shot himself or got someone to shoot, and the idea of Caligula is he's an emperor who is renowned for his depravity, madness. I mean, the thing I knew about him, the only thing I knew about him really before seeing the film, even hearing about the film years ago, was that he made his horse into a consul. That's because I remember reading The Rotten Romans, which was a horrible history book, and obviously they didn't put the sex in that, it's for kids, but they put this thing about his horse, which apparently is not all that true. But that's kind of it was representative of his madness.
Yes.
And that's kind of his reputation. And so the film was supposed to be this epic. It was the most expensive independent production ever. I think it still might be. And it had these ridiculously opulent sets, costumes, camera work, lighting, and it was going to be full of sex, violence, and so on. And it's kind of famously gone down as this plotless, chaotic mess.
Well, huge success, though.
Was it?
It was. It was one of the top films of 1980.
Okay.
Yeah, a massive box office hit because everyone went to see the nudity.
Yeah, sure. But this idea has persisted ever since then that there's a great film inside the thing that came out waiting to be unleashed. Because that's the kind of classic thing of the film that was taken away from the artists.
Yeah.
You get that with Magnificent Ambersons as well. And apparently all of this footage, 90 hours of footage, has been unearthed. I don't know exactly the kind of situation.
We get that in titles at the beginning of the film, which I found quite interesting because it said, this is based on 90 hours of footage, none of which is in the original released version. This is all previously unseen footage that you're about to see.
Which is interesting, and I doubted that, to be honest. I thought, can that really be true? But I was just reading the he's not credited as director here. I don't know exactly what his credit is, but the guy who's overseen this, well, it's not a restoration, it's a rebuilding of the film.
Yeah.
Kind of from first principles. The idea is to kind of hew as close to Gore Vidal's script as they possibly can. His name is Thomas Negovan. He's a writer, musician, and art historian from Chicago. That's Wikipedia. I'd never heard of the guy, and he's not put down as a film director. And Tinto Brass's name is no longer credited as film director. He's credited as principal photography now, and he has disavowed, distanced himself from this version as well as the original. Right? I don't know. I guess he didn't want to speak to them or whatever it might be. Because from what I understand, this Thomas Negovan has taken in as much material as he can from the time, interviews with the actors and director and so forth, to say to see what were the intentions and so on, and spoken to people who were involved in the production, just immersed himself in scanning and watching all of this footage. And apparently, so he says, he didn't see the original film until he was some way into editing the film, this new version. So I can believe now that no original theatrical footage has made it into this, just because it appears to be not what he was picking from. He wasn't saying, I'll go from this particular scene and recut it like this. He seems to have been picking from raw footage from scratch to build the film as he sees it.
Well, I'm a bit disappointed because I would have liked to have... So if part of the original problem was that Bob Guccione filmed this hardcore footage and interspersed it in the film at the expense of the film, cutting out narrative, I would have liked to have seen the film restored with, what was originally in it, and what was originally taken out for the hardcore footage. Whereas this idea that, it's completely unseen footage, i.e., even if they're having the same scene or the same bit of dialogue, they're using a different take or something.
That's what it seems to be, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of it, though I found the whole thing kind of very entertaining. With, I mean, the things that you mentioned earlier as kind of criticism, I loved. I loved the costumes. I loved the set design, right? Like kind of.
Well, those were meant as criticisms. I mean, that's just a description of the scale of this film.
Yeah. I mean, I love that.
They looked amazing. I mean, they looked ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the camera work is heavily planimetric, straight on shots, which with sets like this really emphasise the scale and make those buildings intimidating.
That's right. So I really appreciated all of that. I thought it had some fabulous imagery as well.
Yeah.
You know, kind of John Gielgud kind of cutting his veins in the bath, and you see like these two almost like velvety strands, you know, kind of from his wrists, right? Like, yeah, kind of. I thought that was wonderful. So, you know, I wasn't bored. It wasn't the experience that I expected, because I wanted to have some kind of reference to the original, and this
which we've never seen.
Yeah, which we've never seen, but you know, so still to see, because this is an entirely new thing.
I mean, it really feels like it. And from the sound of what everyone has said, a completely different film.
Yeah. So
I mean, this has a plot. It has character arcs. No one has ever said that about the original Caligula.
Well, yeah, character arcs.
Up to a point. But I mean, Helen Mirren, for instance, in the original apparently was in it for 9 minutes. In here, she's in for some 53 minutes.
All right, so well, but you know, well, I was going to say she doesn't get much to do, though. I mean, obviously she does in terms of plot, but she doesn't in terms of character. You know, so I think it's trash, really, the whole film. So again, the comparison to Ambersons, to me, it's like, you know, Ambersons is a truly great film, and you can see why people mourn, you know, the ending and so on. Kind of, you know, this is trash, but nonetheless, very entertaining, and also kind of illuminating on some things, right? Like, it kind of made me really appreciate Malcolm McDowell. Well,
Malcolm McDowell has said, finally, a version of this film where you can see one of my best performances. He's very happy with this.
It's great.
With this recut. And you can see why.
Yeah.
You can see why. It's all about him, and he is wonderful in it. Yeah. And he looks he looks beautiful.
Well, actually, I thought it was interesting, because in some shots, the way that he's filmed, he really looks beautiful. In other shots, he looks like, you know, a working class Joe from Newcastle or something, you know? That kind of, you know, that light, kind of slightly reddish haired look that they have, you know. So that combination of sometimes extraordinary beauty, sometimes ordinariness, but coupled with a truly brave performance, and I mean brave in every sense. Brave in that he's naked, full frontal, right? Like, you know, I mean, not throughout, but, you know, there are occasions. But also in his choices, right? Like, kind of, you know, that moment where he comes sliding into the Senate, right? Like, the choosing
like
to slide.
Business.
Yeah, like Risky Business. Before Risky Business. And he's funny, and he's camp, and he does drag, and fisting, right? Like, I mean, you know, it's kind of incredibly daring in all kinds of ways, and he plays it with great humor, I think, as well. Yeah. You know, so he is absolutely tremendous, and the reason to see the film.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of absurdity to everything that's being shown. There's you can feel a satirical intent behind it, right? And it reminded me rather of Salo, which was also about, you know, sexual depravity amongst kind of elites.
Yes.
You know, and that had, I think, a much more pointed political purpose.
Very much so. And it was much more cohesive and
absolutely
everything.
But I think you feel some of the same things here, and these films are not so far apart in terms of, this is what, 1979, Salo was 1975.
Yeah.
And, you know, these are not the only films to have satirised power and to have connected it with sex. But there is something about the large scale of them both, the orgy scenes, essentially, there seems to be something of the time in that.
But for me, they're very different, because in Salo, my God, you know, like, actually, you know, when I first saw Salo, I had to get out halfway through and vomit.
Really?
Yeah, I was very young, and I'd never seen anything like it before, and that circle of shit stuff. Yeah, like,
Was that not X-rated?
Sorry?
Was that not X-rated, Salo? Because you said that you couldn't see Caligula because it was X-rated.
I couldn't see Caligula, but I saw Salo. I mean, I didn't see Caligula at all. I saw Salo, and it must have been after I turned 18 in a repertory cinema, because, it might have been made and released in 75, 76, but then it circulated in repertory cinemas for a decade after.
Okay.
So, but I was still very young when I saw it, so I must have just turned 18 or something. Sure. I'd never seen anything like that before, and and I literally went out to vomit. I mean, so I mean, this is orgies for fun and pleasure and delight, and
yes, clearly there's
to be turned on.
There's an intent to titillate, and everything's kind of for shock value. And you can only imagine. I mean, maybe we will get around to seeing the original cut at some point. You can only imagine how much more for shock value that would have been.
Yeah.
Because here it does feel. I suppose you were saying, it wasn't quite the experience I expected, and I feel the same way. But it's because I didn't know anything, and so when I just know the reputation of Caligula. And then when you see Caligula, the ultimate cut, what does that suggest? More of everything. But this is the only director's cut, or kind of restoration type cut of a film to put less of that stuff in. Because it's like no. The stuff that we think could be good or is good and is just hidden is all of this story that is incoherent from the original or not fully explained, all that kind of stuff, which is what they've tried to do here. And it is coherent, and it does make sense, and I do think there are character arcs, and I think it privileges the performances of the actors. But I also found it very slow. 3 hours feels like a long time, which is what this is.
I loved it almost all the way through until I began to wonder, when is this intermission happening, right?
I didn't even know that would be one.
Yeah, I did, because I think it said so at the beginning in the credit sequence, or maybe in the program it said there would be an intermission. It said somewhere.
Yeah, you bought the tickets, so probably on the website.
Yeah, it did say that, so maybe it was that. But I did kind of begin to look at my watch towards the end of the first section. The last section after the intermission was so short, it was under an hour, that that seemed to go by kind of quickly. I can't say I was bored, though I do, so I suppose my question to you is, what are these character arcs? What is the film about, really? What is the point of it? Because, I mean, I had fun watching it, right? It's very humorous and very sly and kind of playful, right? So I did enjoy it, but actually, if you're talking about it in terms of like a film, as a work of art with depth and so on, I mean, I don't see it.
No, I mean, I think that's extremely limited, and I won't defend it on the count of I think this is one of the best films I've ever seen, but I think they seem to have dug out something that was apparently not there in the original. I think, but essentially the story of Caligula as told in this film is that his great uncle, I think, Tiberius, is on his last legs, played by Peter O'Toole. He's got VD, he's got sores all over his face. He thinks everyone's out to get him. He's gone mad. He's on his last legs. They kill him to make sure of it. And he becomes the emperor at the age of, I think he's 24. He has an enormous amount of fun straight away. He gets in with the people straight away. This general amnesty he immediately brings in, because again, it's very generally explained, isn't it? But all these people that Tiberius had exiled, he says, bring them back. Forget all that. It's a fresh start. And by the end of his 4 years, and by the time he's murdered by a conspiracy of his sort of vizier and the leader of the armed forces, he has turned into Tiberius. He's saying the same things. He's driven mad by power, and so I wondered. Certainly, by the very end, I think you have to go with the impression that he has really lost his mind, and this stuff that he's been saying before then about being a god, literally being a god. And the thing about turning his horse into a consul, which appears in this film, I think are played quite rightly as sort of jokes. I mean, certainly the thing about being a god is because he gets the Senate, he intimidates the Senate into voting that he is a god. He says I, and they have to go along with it. And then he says to his wife, the Helen Mirren character, "Do you think I'm a god?" And she goes, "Yes." And you know that she doesn't. And he goes, "Are you just as stupid as them?" Like, he's like, a deliberate, he doesn't believe he's a god at that point. By the end, he might do. And the thing about the horse, I think it plays as an offhand comment or joke on the Senate, like a horse could do your job sort of thing, or I take you so unseriously, I will put a horse in there too, as opposed to I really believe my horse is the right guy for the job.
I think it's a very poor piece of writing by Gore Vidal. I don't think it tells us anything about the Roman Empire. I really don't think it tells us anything about Caligula. I mean, he begins mad, right? Like he is already somebody at the beginning of the film who's sleeping with his sister, and who has killed every member of his family except for the emperor.
Yeah, he's
right?
a scheming.
So so kind of, once he gets on the throne and has absolute power, he just does more of that until the end, where he gets killed for doing more of that. I don't get any sense of progression. Actually, I think Matthew McDowell is so great because he makes you kind of find that character appealing and funny, and I mean, he's never quite endearing. You certainly kind of don't have empathy for what he does, but you get a joy out of the performance of all those evil things. But I don't see sides to that or depth to the character as written, right? So when you talk about arc, that's like change and development and so on. I don't see that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. But at least a plot.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of plot. Yeah, that's
arguably too much. I mean, there's probably one too much. I would like, because I'm just thinking, where's all the sex? I was promised so much sex, and of course, I wasn't promised all this sex. This is not that cut. But
there's quite a lot of sex.
There's quite a lot of sex and tits and stuff, and it's lovely. But like, they've taken out definitely. I don't know how long the original cut is. To be fair, I doubt it's 3 hours long. But certainly they've been like replacing pornography with an argument between Malcolm McDowell and Helen Mirren, which I guess is like kind of dramatically more interesting. But I do kind of think if the point of this was to exhibit debauchery and titillate and so on, I'm missing that here.
Oh, I'm not. I mean, so I think what's missing is close-ups of hardcore penetration, right? But everything else is there. I mean, my God, you even have like, a birth scene with like the head of the baby coming out
still
of,
some shocking stuff.
Helen Mirren's vagina, and you see it all, right? Like, and
rape on a wedding night,
and the rape of a wedding night of the groom and the bride. It's. I mean, I think it's got everything: flogging, dildos. I mean, actually, one of the things that it made me think of, because John Gielgud and Peter O'Toole kept saying, "Oh, we didn't know what we were getting into," and you think, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Because you see them now, and there's a big dildo in front of their face, and they're fondling some lady's breast, right? And they say, "Oh, we didn't know it would be that kind of film." I mean, when you consider that this is like filmed in 1978, 79. I mean, the idea of doing that 15 years before would have been unimaginable in another universe, really, right? Like, so they might not have realized that it would be like hardcore close-up penetrative sex, but they actually knew. And, in a film of that period where you have the leading man and the leading lady, the above the title leading man, full frontal, nude, in a mainstream film of 1979, when have you seen that before or since? I mean, I can't remember. I mean, Tom Cruise doesn't show his dick. John Travolta doesn't show his dick. Like, Brad Pitt's never shown his dick. I mean,
Ben Affleck and Gone Girl. Blink and you missed it, but it was there.
Okay,
but
fair
no,
enough.
I know what you mean. I completely get what you mean. I've definitely been ruined by modern pornography and access to sexual imagery, because it's just not the same. You the stuff that is on show in this film, although it is done to a kind of aestheticized degree and very expensive degree, and it looks marvelous, but it's all stuff that you can just see for free online, and have been able to for 20 years. It's sort of sexual imagery. It's very differently available now, and it's very differently understood and just kind of integrated into people's psyches than it was 1979. Actually,
I would argue, so let me kind of just be contrary as usual, because you see, I would argue that the nudity and the sex is still one of the reasons to go see this film.
Yeah.
Because, the bodies are so different, than what you see in porn, right? Or what you see today, even. Like, there's nobody body built, right? There's nobody who's got a nautalized body, right? Kind of, so they've got very beautiful bodies, but actually one of the interesting things in this film is seeing the bodies and how different they all are, right? Like, and even seeing Helen Mirren, who I think is, is very beautiful. She's got a wonderful body, and again, she's completely naked, right? But also, she's got like a Russian peasant's body, right? Her hips are very large, right? And she's got kind of short legs and very full-breasted, and so a very beautiful body. But it's not the kind of body that you see, kind of, Yeah.
You're not watching the right porn, Jose.
Well, maybe
there's all sorts available.
Maybe, but
I know what you mean.
These
are bodies and like looks of their time. Absolutely.
Yeah, of a time which allowed for more diversity, I think, because certainly, like, to me, a lot of the female film stars of today, for example, they're all kind of like relatively tall and quite thin and full-breasted and small-hipped, kind of, Angelina Jolie is the type of ideal of that, right? But you don't see any wide-hipped film stars, right? Like, So I thought just kind of looking at Helen Mirren naked was kind of, interesting. The attitude to sex also, which is very playful, right? So you do have a lot of dildos and swings and, so there's a thing of, it's kind of romanticized in a way, made decadent in another, but it's also like a kind of a wink or a joke.
It's a cartoon.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that attitude to sex, that it isn't serious, that it isn't, that it's kind of fun and body and, the joke with the coins and the vagina and, like, to make a magic trick out of it.
I think I missed that one.
Well, when Colin McDowell goes into the jail and there's an orgy happening and, the jailer comes in and he turns out to be a magician and he takes one coin, makes it disappear.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Kind of, that's all very playful, I think,
Yeah.
It has an element of threat, but it's still also kind of, very playful.
Yeah. Well, sex is absolutely used for threat as well, in when it comes to particularly that wedding scene, prima noctis scene, which is really dark. I would be interested to see how that's handled in the original film in particular. Because, you again, from the sound with the original film, it's this kind of chaotic mess. But that is a particularly dark scene. You have to handle it. It's interesting how it's handled. Actually, at one point, it made me laugh because he's saying, he's basically threatening them into it. Like, they don't really believe, and then it suddenly becomes clear that he is going to do this. And he's sort of questioning, is she really a virgin? She's a virgin. And then he has sex with her, and there's blood everywhere, and it's awful, and the imagery's horrendous. But then he just kind of jumps off with a kind of, oh, she really was a virgin. And that line's delivery really made me laugh. I was the only one who did, and I felt like other people were judging me.
Yes, I did as well.
You judged me or you laughed?
No, I laughed.
Okay,
I laughed,
good.
Yeah.
That is a really, that is a delicate play with tone going on.
Yes,
there,
it
which
is.
Works.
Yes, but again, you see, so again, just to go back and looking at it as a normal narrative film, you think, what motivated him to do it, right? So, he went to try out wives. This was a virgin who was promised to someone else, Was that the motivation for...
Well, in the previous scene, he tried to kill the husband by putting him into that wall of death thing, but he survived it. And so this seems to be the improvised way of...
I know, a revenge. I know, I get that.
Yeah.
But a revenge for what? Did he even want her? I don't remember him saying, I want her.
No.
Right? So mind you, that's in keeping with the character, right? That,
Capriciousness.
The capriciousness. But then kind of it means that everything lacks a certain kind of cohesion, right? So I must say I had a very good time nonetheless, right? Like,
yeah, so did I.
And I loved the look, and if this is a restoration of the footage, at least, they did a very good job because, the 35 has a kind of a graininess. Yeah, you can tell that it is like a 35, but it's beautiful, and the colors are beautiful. you know, and I really appreciated Peter O'Toole's look with all the red patches for his syphilis and so on, right? You think, my God, he really let himself, you know, kind of be shown in this way. On the other hand, I really didn't like his performance, right? And I thought it was interesting because obviously what they wanted to do was bring in a lot of prestige British actors. Because, I mean, the only person who was any kind of box office at that moment was Malcolm McDowell, right? You know, because of his work with Kubrick and Lindsay Anderson and, though not big box office, but, you know, kind of, I mean, he is above the title. Kind of everything else is really just, what is it, posh English stage actors, right? Like classy.
Yeah,
classy.
but it's trying to bring that particular type of actor in to add a certain something to what you're saying. It's going to shock you with how debauched it then is.
Yes, and you see, I thought Colin McDowell was marvelously witty. Malcolm McDowell was marvelously witty with his line readings and his inflections, and he made you laugh and pay attention in unexpected ways. I thought Peter O'Toole was terrible, right? It was like, you know, that kind of cliche of a British stage actor just declaiming things in a loud voice, right? His performance throughout the beginning seemed completely one note in that register. And it was only his look, that kind of makes that performance interesting, I think.
Yeah, you know? The very bad one note kind of King Lear thing.
Yeah.
And also, I just found his dialogue, and a lot of the dialogue in the early part of the film, just very hard to understand. Whether it's the shoutiness, something about the recording, I don't know what it was, but maybe it's the sound system, I don't know. It just wasn't, I wasn't getting a lot of it. And then when he goes and kind of normal conversations start happening at normal levels, I was like, okay, I can understand these words now. That was an issue.
Yeah, it's him being kind of loud and actory and stagey.
Yeah.
Which, you know, and I say it as someone who really loves Peter O'Toole, but this was a terrible performance, I thought. But with a fascinating look. And then John Gielgud, I thought, was brilliant. You know, just, you know, he looked amazing. He was given fantastic imagery. He was kind of the opposite of O'Toole, because he was very subdued, right? It was a real kind of pleasure to see him. So, you know, on a performance level, I liked it on the whole kind of very much. I really, really loved the look of it. Even though you are right, it's not, and I don't like using this term because cinematic can be anything, but actually because it can be anything, when you often see that static head-on kind of type of shooting, that you see it does bring out the scale of the film, but kind of when it's overused, it feels it's unimaginative. So what is interesting about the film visually comes from the set design and the lighting and the costumes, not from anything that's being done with the camera.
No, I guess I agree with you. I mean, I did like the planimetric shooting, and I thought it was consistently effective, but there's also not a lot of variety in it.
Yeah, exactly. So and I'm very glad I saw it, and actually it makes me want to watch. Yeah,
we should look at the original.
Yeah.
To what extent? I mean, I don't know how many versions and cuts there are, but to what extent we can find, you know, the original.
Well, there'll be the original release, at least.
Guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't know. That's all.
Yeah.
But it's not lost, is it? It's like,
no.
I mean, the idea is that all this footage, I guess, was kind of. I don't think it was lost. It was just like archived. I mean, from what I got from this, this Thomas Negovan who's put this together, it seems like he was just given access to these archives, and then it kind of came up in conversation. So, are you going to do this? And then he felt like if he didn't, the archives would be closed for half a century and no one else would get to.
Sure.
So that's the kind of impression I get. Like, it wasn't so much his intention right away, but it became imperative almost. Like, if someone has to do this, it's got to be me then.
Well, I'm very glad I saw it. I mean, you know, kind of. And actually, let me tell you, had I seen this when I was 18, you know, kind of Malcolm McDowell would have become one of my sex pin-up gods.
There's still time. You're still around. The one other thing I want to say is how brilliantly comfortable the Mockingbird seats are. We saw this at the Mockingbird in Screen 2, and the last film we saw there was, I think, the public lavatory film set in Japan.
The Wim Wenders film.
What was it called? Perfect Days.
Yes.
Which was a lovely film, but I remember the seats being uncomfortable, and I think since then, it seems, unless I'm just misremembering, it seems like they've filled out that cinema with these wonderful, deep, cushioned sort of armchairs, which I love.
I love the whole place, and I would go a lot more if it was closer to me. But I love the ambiance. I love the staff. Everyone is super nice. I mean, I had bought the tickets for both of us, and you were 20 minutes late. And I just told the usher, my friend is going to come in late. Could you let him in? He said, no problem. I mean,
yeah, he was sound.
I can't imagine Cineworld, doing the same. And actually, there were times when I've tried to do that at the former Electric, and they wouldn't do it either, right? So I think it has a really nice atmosphere.
Yeah, they're good guys.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I might be misremembering the seats thing. I think maybe last time there were a lot of comfortable seats, but we were sat right at the front on cheap seats that had been like added in extra. So I think maybe that's what I'm remembering. So if you can get in just the regular seats, you're doing well. Because that's also lovely seats.
And if I can say, they have really inventive programming, right? Which the Electric did not. Yeah, the Electric, it was kind of, mainly the same type of films that you get at Cineworld with, a really high profile international release or something. Whereas this, it's kind of, I don't know how they do it. They must have guest programmers, and they have a lot of people that come in to show stuff they like, right? But they're showing a lot of indie films. They were showing some Like It Hot. Yeah, they're showing a lot of festival films. Yeah, so it's a place, if you live in Birmingham, to go see things that are otherwise quite difficult to see. Yeah, they're being kind of very inventive with the programming. So congratulations to them, really.
Yeah. And just last thing, talking about, two things, actually three things briefly.
Okay.
But one is just the look, because you were talking about the look, and remember we were talking about just Deadpool just the other day, and you were saying you love the glossiness.
Yes.
And I was thinking, I agreed with you, I did like the look of it, but I didn't say this at the time, but I was thinking, I don't know that glossy is a word I would have used for that film. Glossy is a word I would use for this.
Well, you see, I wouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah, because the way that I'm using glossy is in that kind of MGM Metro color way where the reds and the yellows gleam. They almost seem like porcelain or metallic, right? Yeah, and it has a density and a texture, and I
felt that here. I felt that in the costumes, in the death of the sister scene where it gets rich and dark red. The lighting is just pure red, and I felt it really popped. And
I thought the image was a bit grainier. I mean, it's very beautiful. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Right, but kind of we're just kind of talking about the use of that term. It's very beautiful use of color and so on. There's that bit with Malcolm McDowell with the red cape. That kind of like really stands out, and also the blues that are really pastel-y and so on. So I think there's beautiful use of color, beautiful use of costumes, but to me it doesn't have that textured sheen and shine, that I associate with glossiness. I think this is kind of, a better use of color, and a more subtle use of color. A lot of the colors are subtle, like when you see Malcolm McDowell come in at the beginning, and he's wearing that white tunic with bits of light green on it and so on. I mean, that is not like the colors of what Francois Truffaut said about Technicolor, they're the colors of the 20th century because nothing like it can be found in nature. Well, that's not true of this film, I don't think.
I just want to briefly mention two of the actors. One is Teresa Ann Savoy, who plays Drusilla, Caligula's sister. I mean, talk about a brave performance with Malcolm McDowell. She gives one as well. Yeah. She's asked to do an awful lot. And, you go.
Yeah, but I think she's more standard.
Yeah, sure.
And generic, actually. She seems to me to be pretty kind of European 1970s kind of, pretty girl who does nudes. I don't actually. I thought she didn't. You see her with McDowell, who's being so, brave and inventive, and she doesn't.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I liked her very much nonetheless. I just wanted to mention that.
Sure.
And the other person I want to mention, and this is just pure looks, is Guido Manari, who plays Macro. who's the first sort of army leader. I don't know actually what the job is, but army leader that we meet who kills Tiberius and then is arrested and killed himself, because there are so many shots of him just kind of artfully framed with him just on the left or on the right and just looking and sort of stood up straight and doing his job and just observing and all that, where he is like you can picture the marble bust of him.
Sure.
He looks unbelievable. Just his face and his attitude.
Yeah.
I love the way he looks. He looks incredible for this. I think that of some of the other actors. I also think that of Malcolm McDowell. You can picture the bust of him too. Well, he has the right look.
The film pictures it for us.
Yes, yeah, of course. But he has this unbelievable look.
Yeah.
Like they picked him out of Rome.
Yeah. He looks very, very handsome.
That's it from me.
All right. Well, we enjoyed it, and I would recommend it. And actually, it really is a film, a big budget release. Yeah. Like you've never seen before.
Yeah. With
huge or since, actually. Again, kind of...
I was just thinking that as well. I was thinking, what do you compare this to? Intolerance, maybe? Griffith? And, like, Triumph of the Will, in terms of, like, the budget and the scale and just showing off the goods?
I mean, budget and scale, I've seen the likes before and since, but kind of the casual nudity, the stars' nakedness, in combination with the budget and the scale, and I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
So so I think it's kind of interesting for what the film tells us about the mores and social conventions of the period, and kind of what titillated at that moment, and what could be made a joke of in that moment as well. Yeah, the film is, I think, kind of quite humorous.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'd highly recommend it, even though it's not a great film.
No.
All right, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. We're on social media, Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.